You know, it strikes me that in nature, the animals that underestimate their predators often end up as, well, dinner.
Hmm.
And when you look at the cybersecurity landscape today, that analogy feels increasingly relevant. The threats we face are becoming remarkably adept, relentless even.
That's a sharp observation.
Yeah.
Because as we've been digging into the latest findings, especially from the 2025 Global Threat Report, a really clear picture emerges.
Okay.
Our adversaries aren't just evolving, they're becoming fundamentally more, well, strategic,
Mm-hmm.
more efficient. The report calls this new breed the enterprising adversary.
Enterprising adversary.
And their increasing reliance on technologies like generative AI, well, that's a bit of a game changer.
Right. It's not just the, stereotypical image of a lone hacker anymore. We're seeing highly organized groups operating almost like businesses.
Exactly, with focus. The report still talks about the main categories. Nation-state actors, e-crime groups, the financially motivated ones, and hacktivists.
Still the main buckets, yeah.
Those remain the primary categories, yeah. But what's really significant now is how their tactics are kind of converging, blurring lines.
Okay.
So our goal in this deep dive is really to unpack the core insights from this report. We need to understand the nuances, these changing threats, especially, like you said, the impact of Gene AI and their novel approaches to attacks.
Got it. So this enterprising adversary idea, what does that really boil down to? What makes them enterprising? Let's start there.
Well, it signifies a move towards optimization, a more targeted approach. These adversaries are starting to mirror the operational efficiency of the very organizations they're targeting.
Ah, interesting.
And the report highlights a notable increase in the number of tracked named adversaries. They reached 257 in 2024. That includes 26 entirely new ones they identified.
26 new players in just 1 year. That really shows how fast the landscape is, well, expanding.
It does. And it's not just the number, but also the speed. The speed they operate at once they get inside a system.
Ah, the breakout time metric, right?
Exactly. Breakout time. That's the measure of how quickly an attacker can move laterally, spread out within a network after that initial entry point. It's decreased dramatically.
How much?
The average is now just 48 minutes.
48.
And the fastest time they actually observed. An astonishing 51 seconds.
51 seconds. That's
Yeah.
alarming.
It is. This drastic reduction really highlights the critical need for, like, real-time detection and response.
Yeah.
Stuff that goes way beyond just traditional perimeter defenses.
Yeah, absolutely. It suggests they're getting incredibly efficient at using that first foothold.
They really are.
And it feels like a major factor driving this efficiency is, well, generative AI. It seems like it's moved way beyond just creating, convincing text. It's impacting the whole attack lifecycle.
Precisely. The report really underscores how easily available these commercial large language models, LLMs, are acting as a significant force multiplier.
The force multiplier.
Yeah, across all those adversary types we mentioned. It's speeding up their learning curves, shortening their development cycles for malicious tools, and letting them scale up operations in ways we just haven't seen before.
So the report seems to indicate that, okay, maybe the malicious use of AI is currently more about refining existing techniques, iteration rather than revolution.
For the most part, yes. It's more evolutionary right now, though we see occasional novel uses popping up.
But we're still seeing some pretty significant real-world consequences already, aren't we?
Oh, definitely. The report gives some really compelling examples from 2024, like famous Chalima, a group linked to North Korea.
Okay, I've heard of them.
They use Gene AI to create these remarkably convincing fake IT job candidate profiles. Super detailed.
So they could, what, apply for jobs?
Exactly. They can infiltrate organizations by essentially hiring their way in. What's fascinating is how they're leveraging AI for social engineering right at the foundation.
That's sophisticated
Sure.
and really concerning. And it wasn't just them using AI for deception, right? Nation states were using it for disinformation, too.
Correct. Threat actors linked to China, Russia, and Iran were running AI-driven disinformation and influence operations. A particular focus seemed to be disrupting elections. Then you have other things, like decoy websites, probably generated by LLMs used in Nitro Spider campaigns to trick people.
Okay.
There's even some speculation about LLMs being used to help develop a potential exploit for CVE 2024-3400, a specific vulnerability.
So even in the really technical stuff, finding and exploiting vulnerabilities, AI might be starting to play a role, or at least they're exploring it.
Seems like it.
And it sounds like the, let's say, more traditional cyber criminal groups are also paying close attention.
They definitely are. You see discussions on criminal forums about using LLMs for coding malicious scripts, generating shell commands.
Lowering the barrier to entry?
Potentially, yeah. It could help less skilled individuals get involved. And beyond that, there's this growing interest among cloud-focused attackers in getting access to enterprise LLMs.
Why? What would they do with that?
Things like stealing sensitive training data or even manipulating the AI models themselves. The report mentions an example called LOM Jamcam.
Okay.
So if you connect this all together, you can see how Gene AI could really reshape the attack landscape, make it more personalized, maybe harder to detect.
And the impact on social engineering seems especially big. I remember reading something about how effective AI-generated phishing emails were.
Yes, that 2024 study, it highlighted a significantly higher success rate. Phishing emails crafted by LLMs got a 54% click-through rate.
54%. Compared to what?
Compared to just 12% for emails likely written by humans.
Wow, that is a stark difference.
It really underscores Gene AI's ability to create highly persuasive, tailored content, at scale, too. And this includes things like those fake LinkedIn profiles with AI text and images used by famous Kalima again. It really forces you to ask, how do you defend against social engineering when the engineer has AI backing them up?
It's a sobering thought. And it seems like e-crime groups are already adapting their initial access methods, maybe because defenses against traditional phishing are getting better.
That's a critical trend the report identifies, yeah. In 2024, e-crime actors definitely started shifting away from relying so heavily on standard phishing. They moved towards alternative initial access vectors.
Like what?
Well, a particularly notable shift was the big increase in social engineering using the phone. Telephony-based exploitation.
Phone calls. That almost seems like a step backward technologically in the cyber world.
It might seem counterintuitive, but it's proving remarkably effective. Phishing attacks, for example, they skyrocketed, a 442% increase between the first and second half of 2024.
442%, just from phishing.
Just from phishing. And we're also seeing a rise in callback phishing. Yeah, it's where they send a deceptive email prompting the target to call them back.
Ah.
Chatty Spider, a group out of Russia, they've been using this against legal and insurance sectors, with extortion demands up to $8 million.
$8 million. From a phone call, essentially.
Well, initiated by the call, they use the phone to build that trust, manipulate people into giving up access or sensitive info.
So it's about getting past the digital defenses by exploiting the human element.
Precisely.
And it's not just direct calls, is it? The report mentioned targeting help desks, too.
Exactly. Threat actors impersonating legitimate employees, calling IT help desks to try and get passwords reset, bypass multi-factor authentication.
Clever.
And they often make these calls outside normal business hours, probably hoping to get longer access before the real employee notices something's wrong.
Makes sense.
We saw examples, too, like Curly Spider using spam bombing first as a distraction, then making the call, and then really quickly deploying remote monitoring and management tools, RMM tools, to get access.
How quickly?
In some cases, leading to Black Basta ransomware deployment in under 4 minutes from that call.
Under 4 minutes. To ransomware. That's an incredibly tight timeline for any security team to react.
It really is.
Okay.
And then there's Plum P Spider, also using phishing, but to get valid credentials and then perform fraudulent financial transactions.
And this use of legitimate RMM tools, that's clever too. It's like using trusted software to avoid needing traditional malware, right? Which is easier to detect.
That's a key insight, yeah. By using these legit tools, they access systems without dropping suspicious files. And the report even notes e-crime forums are actively recruiting English speakers with RMM tool experience.
So that suggests this trend isn't going away.
Strongly suggests, yeah. Phone-oriented social engineering looks like it'll be a significant threat continuing into 2025.
So adversaries aren't just getting technically better, they're also getting much better at exploiting human behavior through these evolving social engineering methods. A constant cycle of adaptation, it feels like.
It really does.
Now, the report also spends quite a bit of time on threat actors linked to China. What were the big takeaways there?
The sheer volume and intensity of China Nexus activity in 2024 were pretty striking. The report documented an average increase of 150% across all sectors compared to 2023.
150% increase. Wow.
And in key industries, ones likely of strategic interest, The increases were even higher, like 200 to 300%. It shows a really sustained, focused effort.
And it's not just the number of attacks. I think the report mentioned new groups, too.
That's right. 7 new China Nexus adversary groups were identified in 2024. It points to a growing, maturing cyber espionage ecosystem there.
Okay.
And these groups are also getting much better at their own operational security, their OPSE. They're managing their huge infrastructure using these operational relay box networks, ORB networks.
ORB networks. What are those exactly?
They're essentially layers of compromised infrastructure, like servers or routers, that they route their traffic through. Makes it significantly harder to trace activity back to the actual origin.
More layers of obfuscation.
Exactly. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, this increased activity, this focus on stealth, it aligns pretty well with the Chinese Communist Party's strategic goals, becoming a leading cyber power HUFU and achieving national rejuvenation.
So this isn't just random hacking. It's tied to broader geopolitical aims.
Very likely, yes. Intelligence collection seems key.
What kinds of targets and methods are these China Nexus actors typically using?
Targets are diverse, strategically significant, foreign political and military organizations, but also domestic groups the CCP sees as threats. The report mentions the 5 poisons.
Okay. And specific examples?
Yeah, they highlight adversaries like Liminal Panda, who show deep expertise in telco networks. Locksmith Panda targets tech, gaming, energy, but also democracy activists in Taiwan, Indonesia, Hong Kong. And Operator Panda often exploits vulnerabilities in internet-facing appliances, particularly in telco and professional services.
It paints a picture of a really persistent, far-reaching intelligence-gathering operation. Okay, shifting focus a bit. The report also talked about cloud security concerns, right? With everyone moving to the cloud.
Absolutely. And the threats are following. The report highlights a growing number of new adversaries actively targeting cloud environments.
New groups focusing on the cloud.
Yeah, we're seeing the rise of what you might call cloud-conscious threat actors, groups that really understand cloud infrastructure, how it works, and are actively looking for vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, especially in that expanding ecosystem around GenAI cloud services. They want the data in there.
Makes sense. Data is the prize. And it sounds like the dynamics of cloud intrusions are changing too. Mentioned something about Scattered Spider.
Right. Scattered Spider was, and still is, a significant player in cloud breaches. But their dominance seemed to decrease a bit in 2024.
Why is that?
Well, partly because more actors are getting into the game. More nation-state actors, more opportunistic cyber criminals are now directly targeting the cloud control plane.
The control plane. That's like the management hub, right? The keys to the kingdom.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
If you control that, you control a lot. And these newer actors are often using similar techniques to Scattered Spider. We're also seeing more abuse of trust relationships.
Oh, so?
Exploiting connections between business partners, for example. Or leveraging insider threats, like we saw with that famous Chilema example earlier.
Right, the fake job candidates. It's a crucial reminder, isn't it? Even with the cloud, fundamental security stuff like access control, monitoring, they're still absolutely vital.
Paramount, yeah.
Okay, finally, let's touch on the network edge, the periphery, and SaaS applications. Still big targets.
Oh, definitely still attractive targets. Devices on the network edge, especially network appliances like routers and firewalls, they continue to get hit hard, often because their security configurations may be weaker or patching is slower.
Right.
The report gives a really compelling example. An unknown threat actor managed to chain together a zero-day vulnerability one the vendor didn't even know about yet.
A 0-day.
A file disclosure flaw, CVE 2024-21287, with a known or end-day deserialization vulnerability, CVE 2024-20953. This is back in September 2024. Chaining those like that shows pretty sophisticated product knowledge.
That really underscores the need for timely patching, but also for vendors to be proactive and for organizations to manage vulnerabilities aggressively.
Absolutely. We also saw continued exploitation of vulnerabilities in Palo Alto Networks products throughout 2024. Those can obviously have a huge impact, disrupting traffic, allowing attackers to move laterally inside the network.
And what about SaaS, software as a service apps, with everyone using them more?
They're becoming increasingly prominent targets, for sure. As organizations migrate more data, more workflows to cloud SaaS platforms, we expect adversaries will target these services more and more.
For what? Data theft?
Data theft, yeah. Extortion, too. And even as a launchpad to compromise third-party organizations by leveraging access they gain through a SaaS platform. The report clearly suggests SaaS exploitation is going to be a major concern in 2025.
Okay, so bringing it all together, it feels like we're facing an increasingly complex, perilous threat landscape. Adversaries getting more efficient, faster, Gen AI boosting social engineering, maybe even exploit development down the line.
Hmm.
A big shift in how they first get in, moving towards social engineering, phone calls, legit RMM tools, huge activity from China-linked groups, and cloud and SaaS becoming prime battlegrounds.
That sums it up pretty well.
It really hammers home that initial point from the report. We just cannot afford to underestimate today's enterprising
That's
adversaries.
the key takeaway is just how dynamic and adaptive this landscape is. These adversaries evolve rapidly, often with real ingenuity. Staying ahead means you need a deep, constantly updated understanding of these trends, and of course, a proactive, multi-layered security strategy.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, maybe we leave you, the listener, with this thought. Given how this convergence of AI and really sophisticated social engineering is going to keep reshaping the cybersecurity battleground, what proactive steps will you be taking to stay ahead of these evolving threats in 2025 and beyond? Definitely something worth mulling over.